Hey everybody, Funky McClunky here. There have been a few announcements lately related to retro style action figures. And I feel like this would be a good time to kind of examine this funny little subgenre of figures and talk about what we like and what we don't like. So let's get into it. So two things were announced recently that got me thinking more about the whole point of retro style 5 points of articulation action figures kind of overall. First is the announcement of Spin Master's new series of figures based on the 1989 Michael Keaton Batman movie. And the second one is Hasbro gave us a sneak peek into the next set of their Star Wars Retro Collection figures, which is the long snoot character, sometimes called Garandan? I don't know. A lot of weird made up names. Anyway, and those two things got me thinking a lot about the current state of retro style action figures, because I design a lot of that style of figures, and so obviously it's near and dear to my heart. It's the bulk of my personal collecting hobby anyway. So just wanted to, I don't know, put a little thought into what the heck they even are and why we like them. So let's talk about the Batman figures first. So I'm going to put some pictures up here probably, but there were some concept images. I don't know if they're final or not that were put out that gave us a peek into the character choices and the design and all that. I don't want to judge too early because I don't know how far along those designs are, but I think the figures look great. I think they look super cool, perfect retro style. I think that the card back, the design of it is cool, but it's weird that they used images of the actual toy, the actual figure in there instead of a character image from the film. Now, I know Spin Master had some problems with the Superman figures, which we'll talk about in a second, where they weren't able to get the rights to use the likenesses of the actors and whatever, stills from the film on the packages. So they just went with the Superman logo or something like that. So I guess this might be a similar situation. I don't know. Or maybe this is just temporary artwork. Don't really know. It looks a little weird, but I'm not like a carded figure collector of modern stuff anyway, so it doesn't really bother me. If I get my hands on these, I'm going to pop them open, and they're going to be loose on display anyway. Not super jazzed that these are Target exclusives, and we'll talk about why in just a second. The price point, I hope, is going to be the same as the Superman figures, which was like $8, which for retro, simple designed, limited articulation, limited accessories, that feels good to me. $12, $13, whatever, that just seems a bit high. I mean, I know everything is going up. Hasbro just announced price increases for all of their stuff, and it just really kind of, it prices you out in a lot of cases. That's a bit of a bummer. Second, let's talk about the long snoot Star Wars figure for a second. I'll put a picture of it up here too. So glad we're getting a figure of this character because it has been one that customizers have been making for years. And I think that when I saw this design, I was glad the character's getting made, but the design, the sculpt's a little weird, right? But I wonder, it got me thinking though, how much of and I'm not the only one that felt this way. So how much of our reaction to this sculpt is because we don't like it versus we've just seen so many customs of this figure done in kind of a different way that's what we're used to. So myself, ton of other people historically have taken a more modern figure, a Garandan long snoot figure, taken his head, popped it off, and stuck it on the body of a vintage Kenner Death Star Commander figure, and then threw a cape on him, gave him like a Cloud Car pilot's communicator, and we called it a vintage style figure, and it looked cool. It did the trick. That's what I've got in my collection. I did a 3D modeled takeoff of that, modified it a little bit. Stan Solo actually did a factory produced version of this with that kind of approach. And so I think we're all just kind of used to that version of it, and so this one looks weird. So I'm going to kind of reserve my judgment on it until the final product comes out. The face sculpt looks a little weird to me, but again, maybe that's just because I'm used to the way that everybody's been doing customs. So anyway, more on that later. In another video hopefully when they actually come out. I'm looking at my cheat sheet here because I want to make sure I don't forget to talk about anything. I want to talk about retro style figures in general and kind of where we are with that style, because again, like I said before, that's my bread and butter. That's what I love to design. I feel like I've got a good handle on that aesthetic, and it's just personally what I have an affinity for based on my childhood and my collection and all of that. So, near and dear to my heart. Let's talk about the background of it a little bit. So like the Star Wars Retro Collection from Hasbro is definitely the standard bearer in this. And I've talked about this in other videos a whole lot, so I'm not going to harp on it. But it's been around for a while. There's like 90-something figures in that series. So that's pretty substantial at this point. They've done figures based on Disney Plus series, the prequel trilogy, but most of it's been on the original trilogy. Reissues of original Kenner figures that were made, and then new characters that weren't. I prefer the approach of new characters that were never made because I have the whole original retro or vintage collection, and I like having a Grand Moff Tarkin figure or a Mon Mothma figure or a Sand Trooper figure, all those things. I think that's cool, and I like that Hasbro seems to be going in that direction. I know there's people who just want to see reissues of the entire original run. I get that. That's cool. Maybe mixing the two is the way to go in the future. We'll see. But, Mattel has done it with their Masters of the Universe. I'm going to mix it up. It's either their like classic series or their origins, whichever the ones are that say like modern design with retro or modern play, retro design, whatever it is, that look like the old ones. They've done quite a few of those. I don't even remember how many. Kenner has done Hasbro has redone the Kenner Indiana Jones figures. They reissued some of the originals and then they added some new ones, which was cool, but it didn't sell very well, and as far as I know, there's no intention of doing any more of those, which as an indie collector is kind of a bummer. And then that brings us to Spin Master and what I want to talk about with relation to the new Batman figures. So the Spin Master, they did Spin Master figures for Superman. There was like 7 or 8 of those maybe, Target exclusive. I never saw those on the store shelves at multiple Targets. And they were never available, to my knowledge, to order through the website. There was no pre-order, no nothing. The items are still on the Target website. They're just never in stock for either local pickup or to order and have delivered. And I don't know if that's ever going to change, really. They're on eBay. People found them, and they're on eBay for high prices, of course. Very frustrating. I would have been happy to buy those. I would have bought the whole set. It would have been great. I kept my eye out for them, especially at $8. That's a great price for that type of figure. It's perfect. So with these new Batman figures that I also would like to have, I'm a little discouraged by the fact that it's once again a Target exclusive, because I feel like this is going to be, they're going to repeat the same mistakes. Limited quantities, great price point, but nobody's going to be able to get them at that price point because they'll just be bought up and scalped on eBay. I hope that I'm wrong about that. I hope that they learn from the Superman situation and will maybe make them more available. But I really have very little faith in Target when it comes to selling stuff like this, which brings me to my kind of overall topic here, which is who are these for? Retro figures just in general. They're for people like me, right? They're for 40-somethings, 50-somethings, people that grew up with the originals, who like that style. They don't care about the 5,000 points of articulation in some of the modern figures. They like the simple aesthetic and all that, and it's nostalgia, right? So I'm confused by Hasbro and Spin Master doing exclusives with major retailers that sell more to the mass audience, mass consumers, families, average Joes. Why are if they're going to be exclusives, why are these not exclusive for Hasbro Pulse, Entertainment Earth, some online retailer? Why make such limited quantities in Spin Master's case? that's a little disappointing and a little confounding, because when I went to Target, multiple Targets looking for the Superman figures, I saw the peg where they would be hung. It was one peg, and it was in with all the kids' toys that, like, my son likes to, my boys like to look at. And rather than over with the, like, adult collectible figures, which I thought was kind of an odd choice. Of course, there were never any figures on that peg anyway, so it never really mattered to me. They put the Masters of the Universe figures in that environment also. So collectors, so they're in with the kids stuff. Collectors have a hard time finding them, and Target has a history of screwing up their inventory a whole lot, especially with pre-orders. So why do these companies keep doing this? What's in it for anybody? I know the answer is generally always money, and I also understand that creating artificial scarcity is a tactic that retailers have used since the dawn of time, but there's a fine line between the thrill of the hunt and being frustrated beyond the point of caring about buying the product anymore. And that's where I feel like we're at with a lot of this stuff. With the last round of Star Wars Retro Collection, that box set that was just the release was a disaster. And then the Superman figures, and sadly, most likely, the Batman figures. So it just would make sense to me, call me crazy, but like, I have run an e-commerce platform before professionally, like for a legitimate media company, done a lot of marketing and so on. It just seems to me that the target audience, the supply is not lining up with the demand, and the target audience is not being hit in the locations that they would be most likely to engage with the product and make the purchase. I, as an adult collector who theoretically is the target demo for retro style action figures, I think it would be really amazing if a company like Spin Master said, hey, we're releasing these Batman figures. And I said, yay, when? And they said, December of 2025. And I say, great, where? And they say, well, they're going to be available exclusively through Entertainment Earth. Great. So I mark my calendar. I go to Entertainment Earth's website. I get out my credit card. Dibba-dibba-dibba-doo. Place the order. A little while later, they've taken my money and the toys show up. They're happy. I'm happy. Everybody's happy. Why is this hard? Why do I, as a late 40s guy, have to go to Target, not find what I'm looking for, and then just only be able to get them from scalpers? It does not add up. So anyway, I'm excited that companies are making these damn things. And I'm frustrated that it seems to be so hard to actually get some of them. So anyway, my only real point here is to encourage discussion around this. So I'm curious, blow up the comments down there. Do you like these things? I know there's some collectors who just hate the retro style figures. I don't really give a shit. I like them. I don't collect the super detailed, high articulation things for a couple of reasons. One, it's just not my thing. And secondly, I'm not spending $25 at retail for a 3 3/4 inch figure. I don't care how much articulation it has and how many accessories he's got. I'm not paying $25 for that. That's ridiculous. So for me, retro stuff is awesome, and it goes in my display case. It looks great with my legit vintage stuff. So give me your opinions. What do you guys like? What are they screwing up? What are they not screwing up? Am I crazy for thinking along these lines? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, stay funky, everybody.